diverse panel with us. So we have Erica Hedinga, who happens to be a UND alum, but a United Airlines pilot who was a pilot project manager on their wellness, well-being curriculum. We've got Captain Brittany Norris with the United States Air Force. We were fortunate enough through some of our research to visit San Antonio a couple months ago and learn about their newly developed CRAFT program that is embedding into undergraduate pilot training for the military. And at the end of the row, we've got Michelle Montgomery. Michelle is someone that I reached out to pretty early on in our process in aviation, thinking about mental health and mental well-being, because our medical school already had an embedded mental well-being coach within their program. There's a lot of similarities between aviation and medical, both in the training atmosphere as well as in the profession. So with that, I'm going to turn over. I think our order is going to be Michelle, Brittany, and Erica. Unfortunately, Dr. Allison Smith was unable to be with us. She's with Delta Airlines, but we do have a video at the end of the presentations that she sent our way. So I don't know if you want to stay there. If you want to come up over here, it's up to you. I'll give you the slides.
Just sit here if that's okay. So thank you for asking me to be here today. It's an honor to sit up on the stage. So I'm just going to talk very briefly about a part of what we do at the School of Medicine here at UND with our medical students, and it really actually starts with our matriculating students. When they find out that they have been admitted to the School of Medicine and Health Sciences, in the spring we have a couple of different days to welcome the students, and they have time to actually sit in the small group learning things that we do, and then I make a presentation. There's several other people that talk with them, but we want them to start thinking about their personal wellness even before they start the journey. And so, and I start the presentation talking about this wellness wheel, which I don't know if it's something that you've all heard about. It's something that's very well written about. So, there's all these facets to wellness. It's not simply going to the gym and exercising and eating right and doing some meditation. There's many different aspects that fit into it. So really what I start to talk to them about is the services and the different things that they will experience when they join our school. So curriculum related, myself and Dr. Jane Dunleavy run a portion of our curriculum called SIMPLE, and that stands for Student-Based Integrative Medicine and Professional Emergence. It's a lot of words. We, like you, use a lot of acronyms in our training. And really the crux of that program is from day one, we start talking to the future physicians about lifelong personal and professional growth involving self-awareness. We start with that. Emotional intelligence, and then just thinking about some of the limitations that come up, especially when thinking about those help-seeking behaviors like Dr. Schneider was just speaking to. And just the curriculum focuses on some ways to demonstrate healthy coping mechanisms to respond to stress. We talk about the managing the conflict between personal and professional responsibilities, and then provide some leadership skills. And so that SIMPLE is, we have our programs of study in our didactic portion, which is 20 months, are called units. So once every 8 weeks, I go in front of the students and we hit on some topics that are focused on things such as, I said, we begin with emotional intelligence, talking about stress buckets, really trying to give them language and the space to start talking about them and their mental health and where they're at right from the get-go. Just knowing medicine, as with aviation, is highly stressful. We talk about stats right away, and it's not to scare the students, but it's more to make them aware you need to talk about things, because it's not if you're going to get stressed and feel like you're overloaded, it's when. So, we want to have that language for them to be able to do that and know that they have the safe space, which is what Dr. Snyder was just talking about as well. Then we go on and talk about imposterism. Then we talk about student and physician well-being and burnout. We have to tackle the subject of physician suicide. So we do that in a way we bring in a couple of our graduates who are physicians who have experienced in their lives personal losses to suicide, and they talk to the students and just about their experiences, and again to let them know it's reality and we need to address that. We teach them how to have difficult conversations with their peers and colleagues. We hit on fatigue management, and then we try to end with resilience. And another thing that I mentioned up there, this Medical Student Wellbeing Index, I wanted to highlight that. That is a tool that was developed by some physicians at the Mayo Clinic. And it's really more of, I would say it's more of a risk assessment. So we have our students take that once every 8 weeks, and they get a personal dashboard to see where they're at and, you know, the areas that they may be struggling in. And it also, it will collect that data on them personally over time, and they can see the comparison within their own class, but then they can see it nationally. So, you know, it gives them a barometer of how they're doing, and it screens for psychological well-being, as well as it's only a 7-item inventory, but it evaluates fatigue, depression, burnout, anxiety and stress, and the mental and physical quality of life in the students. And it's 100% anonymous. So I, as the administrator for our school, I get the aggregate data, but I don't get the personal, who it is. It's 100% anonymous. And what it will do is it'll identify stress, and it promotes awareness and providing wellness resources. So that's really an important thing that we try to do and provide for our students all the way through. So they have their 20 months on campus, and then they go off for for years, the end of year 2, 3, and 4, they're in clinical situations, and they still have contact with us for that. We also have just something that's called Achieve, something similar to Simple. I teach an elective called Mind Body Medicine. I was trained at Georgetown, and what that is, that teaches the students it's a basic introduction to 11 different mindfulness techniques that they can use not only with themselves, but hopefully with their future patients. And then we have weekly emails and reminders, and then we lecture to them on other psychiatry-related issues. Then these are just some examples of non-curricular. So Britta is one of our star therapy dogs that we bring in. And just some other things that we do, non-curricular. I don't need to read through all of them. I am a certified yoga instructor, so I provide free classes once a week right now for students, so and anybody, faculty. And then these are just the social things. This is what I share then with those incoming students. These are just some examples of the wheel of social on the wellness wheel. These are just a few examples, so they kind of know what they're coming into. Emotional, of course, we partner with the University Counseling Center. I also am sort of a triage, so they come to me, kind of explain what's going on confidentially, and then I can then refer them on for many of these other services. I just share with them the physical things that we have available here at UND. Intellectual, so this is just, more supports around that wheel. Spiritual, then the environmental and occupational. We do have a professional health program here in North Dakota for, it was originally for licensed physicians and physician assistants and medical students. I think 8 years ago, were grandfathered into the program. So we have that as support for them as well. So that's the end of mine.
Thank you, and I think up next will be Captain Norris. Yep. Do you want to stand here? Should be on. Yep. Can I stand? Yep, you can stand. Do I still have to hold this? No. Okay. I don't want to. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to come and talk. So the Air Force decided that I was ready for more roles and responsibilities and promoted me to major. So it's Major Brittany Norris. So that's where the confusion came from. So sorry about that. So I came from Randolph Air Force Base. I work at the 19th Air Force, which for those not familiar is the headquarters for all the pilot training in the Air Force. And I am the Deputy Program Manager for CRAFT, which is Comprehensive Readiness for Aircrew Flying Training. Not a mouthful at all. Just a disclaimer that none of the non-federal entities are any endorsement from the Air Force. An overview, because that's always required. So where did CRAFT come from? A long time ago in the year 2020, when we started going through our pilot training transformation. I'm not sure if any of you guys are aware of that, but that started to roll out, and the then commander of the 19th Air Force, General Wills, had an idea that he wanted to put human performance as a pillar in flying training. So he came down to the Aircrew for Performance branch, and Major Carolyn Pricemore, you may have heard her name before, kind of took this idea and really ran with it. And now it started rolling out with the pilot training transformation. So started at Vance, Randolph, Columbus, and now it's across. We just expanded to 5 more locations. So it's going well. It's getting good reception from the students. And our overall mission is to instill these 21st century aviators with a holistic approach to human performance optimization from the beginning of their career, give them the tools that they need for their entire career. And we target the physical, cognitive, and resiliency domains. So our vision is to enhance the long-term combat readiness and lethality of our Air Force through this human performance strategy and building that foundation for lifelong effectiveness, focusing on the whole airman. So some of the objectives we hope to achieve with CRAFT through our pilot training is just the educating the students on human performance, providing the tools that they need and can leverage to manage the stressors throughout their Air Force career, not just in pilot training. Support and improve student performance, again, those physical, cognitive, and resiliency domain, as well as reducing long-term injury and chronic pain. So we have a lot of pilots in the room. I think they can attest to the neck and back pain that is very common. So we hope to start tackling that early. This is just kind of the rollout of CRAFT. So CRAFT will evolve and has evolved into a human performance foundational element within the pipeline. So I have a slide on it, but it is in the curriculum, it is embedded, it's required, it's just part of their training. And we started in UPT, we've gone to IFF, IP, and beyond. So we've expanded even to one of the heavies at Aldis Air Force Base. So as you can see, we tackle the physical, we do conditioning, nutrition, recovery and sleep. Cognitive, we do a lot of different training with that, but information processing, attention management, learning methods, and then resiliency, so stress management, growth mindset, mindfulness. This is just kind of some of our current locations, our full program, some of the partial programs we're rolling out. And you guys might be familiar with the optimizing the human weapon system, usually in fighter, with fighter units, and that is very heavily relying on and targeting physical. So fighter pilots tend to have a lot of neck and back pain, which ends up being a retention issue. So AWS and CRAFT work together, but there's a little bit of a difference there. So our methodology, we have 3 different types of specialists. We have strength and conditioning specialists, we have cognitive performance specialists, and we have performance dietitians. So these individuals are in the training units and in the squadrons, so they're there for the students only. They're easily accessible, they get to know the students. When we start looking at cognitive performance specialists, I'm gonna kind of focus on those for this conference, but they have a variety of backgrounds, but they're not medical providers. So they work with the students on the stressors that they are experiencing in pilot training, but if they come to a cognitive performance specialist and say, I'm having difficulties in my marriage, they say, thank you for coming to me, let me get you the help that you need. So I think it opens the door for getting those conversations started, getting them with the providers that they need to see. And then we have our performance dietitians as well. So our academic instruction, like I said, it depends on the length of the curriculum that they're currently in, but we have 8 to 10 hours that is purely CRAFT in those. And we do aircrew conditioning, the nutrition, fatigue and sleep hygiene, cognitive performance. So some of the things that we do is mindfulness and mindset, fatigue management, directive thoughts, learning and cognition, collective reasoning, and then academic tips. So teaching students how to be students and how to learn best so that they're not taking a quiz, mind dumping everything, and then going on to the next thing. And then resiliency. So I like check-rightitis. Is that a term? So how do they get past that? A lot of the times these students come here and they're high performing and they might fail one of those rides, and that might have been the first failure they've ever had. So those cognitive performance specialists are there to help them work through that and get them past those milestones there. So again, I think I've had some conversations, but it's a culture shift, right? So if we start embedding this from day one, it supports that culture shift and into student-centered learning as well. So kind of what we talked about, those syllabus requirements, just for your awareness. So like I said, 8 plus or minus depending on the length of their syllabus. They do have intake and outtake assessments. And then they're required 2 craft events a week, no less than 1 hour. So that can be with anybody. That can be with a cognitive performance specialist or the strength coach or with the dietitian. And they just log that. So some of our expected outcomes, again, with that pilot training transformation, it really centered on student-centered learning. So we're trying to improve that methodology, increase student awareness of their unhealthy habit patterns. I know a lot of students live on energy drinks and candy bars and no sleep, so hopefully that they get some awareness of their patterns, improve their study methods, develop routines, improve and increase resilience and development of growth mindset, student decision-making, mistake and stress management, increasing the fitness levels and improve G performance for those who do track fighters, improve the student success rate, and that early intervention of those who are struggling physically, mentally, or emotionally, and then creating overall that healthy and balanced lifestyle. I kind of put this up here. I'm not going to go through all of it, but I wanted to target kind of those that discuss our CPSs. So one said, since working with their CPS team after hooking 2 rides and thinking about dropping out of the program, they haven't hooked a ride since they started working with the CPSs in the 6 weeks and are still in the program. Diaphragmatic breathing is something that they teach, and it's been a great tool. They use it in their day-to-day life, focusing on their breathing. They didn't miss anything. Let's start with that stuff worked, which is great. And then they're not as fatigued as they used to be. They're cleared for solo. And then here's IP, so the instructor pilot testimonials. They can see a difference in those student pilots who did have CRAFT versus those who didn't, especially when they're working with the CPSs. A couple strength and conditioning testimonials. Yeah, basically excellent programming and variation is what we need for long-term health and performance, and expanding and building that early culture for young pilots. So with funding, we need data. So here's what we're currently using. SmartOvace, Fitbit, Bridge, and Synaptic is really what our cognitive performance specialists use for visual acuity, target acquisition, go, no-go, reaction time, cognitive loading. And we do what we call mind gym. So that's where the CPS and the strength coaches work together to get the student fatigued and then work on cognitive skills. Because you guys aren't fatigued at all in an airplane ever when you're making decisions, right? And that's it.
Little musical chairs, love it. I wanted to start off this presentation just by painting a little picture for you. I want you to imagine that you just got hired at your dream airline to be a pilot. You've worked your whole life to get to this point. You've worked at terrible jobs. You worked through all of your type ratings, and you've finally gotten to your dream job. You've built enough hours, and you made it. And then you get started into the simulator, and for whatever reason, you are all up in your mind. You're so nervous. You're so intimidated by the fact that you're at your dream airline that you can't perform. And all these things that you've already known and you already are good at, checklists and call-outs and V1 cuts, you're already good at that, and you can't seem to do any of it. And you've had multiple review boards, and you've failed multiple simulators, and you can't seem to pass your check ride, and they're talking about firing you, and you know you're about to lose your job. You are freaked out. You can't imagine having to tell your family that you failed and that you lost this job. And then you notice you get scheduled for a different type of training event. It's called resilience training. You've never heard of this before, but you go in and you show up into this classroom and you're greeted by a resilience coach who also happens to be a pilot for the same airline. and they sit down with you and you talk about everything that's been going on in your mind, everything that's been happening in the simulator, what's been happening in your personal life. You go through all your thoughts that you've been having, that you're not good enough, that you're gonna fail, that you're not doing well. And you work through, you untangle that necklace with this coach, and they give you tools. They give you better ways of dealing with your stress. They give you new ways to think about things, new mantras, new ways to encourage yourself, better study techniques, sleep techniques. And you go back into the simulator and you realize you're doing better. You mess something up and you can move on from it. You don't ruminate on the fact that you just messed something up. And you're getting better and better, and your confidence is building, and you end up passing your check ride. This is something that 5 years ago would never have happened. You would have gotten fired. But this is something that is happening right now at United Airlines because of our resilience program. That's what I'm here to talk to you about today. My name is Erica Hittinga. I'm a pilot for United as well as the director of the resilience program. So I've developed this along with our human factors team, and we're super excited for this next generation of human factors. So what is resilience? Quay gave us a great definition earlier. This is pretty much the same one. Resilience in the general public is our ability to bounce back. It's our ability to handle challenges. Resilience in aviation is defined as the ability of a crew member to recognize, accept, and adapt to disruptions. Now, what kind of disruptions do we have as pilots? Well, we have emergencies, interruptions, check ride-itis, it's real. Startle events. We all know that this is part of the job, right? But what about all the human stuff? Sleep struggles, financial stress, frequent travel, constantly sleeping in a different bed, especially in training, you're uncomfortable, you're stressed out all the time. What about all of that? We're not trained to deal with that. Well, now we are, which is very cool. Our resilience program objective, first and foremost, is to empower pilots to help themselves. This is not about mental health, it's about preventative maintenance. So encouraging pilots to help themselves, learn different techniques to calm themselves when they're stressed out, learn breathing techniques, learn sleeping techniques. These are just simple tools to improve your mental agility. So you're no longer stuck in the same rut of doing things the same way, it's not working very well. This is new tools to improve your mental agility. This gains self-awareness. If you become aware of how you handle stress and your reaction to stress, and different techniques to deal with it, you become more self-aware. You know your triggers, you know how you handle things. So self-awareness is key to addressing resilience. Responding versus reacting, Quay mentioned this earlier too. We get into this response versus reaction when we get stressed, so we have a choice. We have to decide, am I going to take a break and look at this and decide how to move forward? Am I going to be rational and logical about it and choose to respond? Or am I going to emotionally react in an immediate way, which usually doesn't go very well? So how are we training this? We're training with simple, effective tools. This is things like breathing, meditation, visualization. We're training people how to chair fly better by using more effective chair flying techniques. We're doing mental interruption techniques, confidence building techniques. These actually work and they make a big difference in people's lives. We're encouraging a mindfulness practice. We've all talked about mindfulness today. There is something to it. There's a lot of research going into it showing that mindfulness works. So we're encouraging people, especially our pilots, to go home and actually have a mindfulness practice on their own. And we're repeatedly exposing them to the information. So it's in our recurrent training. We're constantly showing them new tools to add to the resilience toolbox. And by repeatedly exposing them to it, we get more stick-ative power. Methods of delivery, right now we're teaching it in classrooms for basic induct. It's actually rolling out this month, which is very exciting. So all of our new hire students are going to be getting resilience training in basic induct. It's also in recurrent training, so we have professional pilot development courses. This happens every 3 years, so they are getting resilience training in those as well as in our computer-based training, which is a trimesterly thing. We also have one-on-one sessions. So what I was describing in our intro is a one-on-one session. So we have resilience coaches, which are trained in by me, and we go through all these different techniques. It takes about 2 to 6 hours. So we sit down with a student, really dig apart what's going on, what the problem is, and we've had a 100% success rate with that, which is really cool. As far as the impact goes, it is multifaceted. So personal impact, if you recognize your triggers, you know how to pause your thoughts and choose to respond rather than react, your personal benefits are endless. Interpersonal, if you have figured out this personal key, interpersonal relationships will be so much better. You'll be better off with your coworkers, better off with your family, better off with your children. And as far as operational, obviously, we are an airline. We're interested in operations. And with operational, if pilots are better mentally equipped, mentally agile, they're able to be safer. They're better able to get along with passengers, better able to do CRM operations. So all of these things are improved, and it cuts down on training costs. Excellent. The challenges that we are facing is the pilot demographic. I liked your pilot personalities better. That's great. We got a bunch of different types of people. Pilots, as we all know, are mostly men. We have ages from 24 to 65, so that's 3 to 4 generations of pilots, that's difficult to train that many people in the same type of way. It's also a soft skill. Pilots are pretty resilient. We've all been through a lot of training. We fly huge airplanes. We go really fast. We've got hundreds of lives on board. So it's hard to tell those people, hey, you need to work on some soft skills. It's generally met with some resistance. So that is a challenge. And finally, the mental health stigma. We've all talked about it today. Mental health stigma is a very real thing, and it's hard to get any pilots on board with anything when you start talking about mental health. So the solution, what we figured out is we need to toughen it up. What I mean by toughening it up is calling it resilience. We're bringing in things that the Navy SEALs use. We're making it more of a military type of approach. By toughening it up, people are much more likely to dig into it. We're also embedding it into established programs. By putting it into all of our training programs, putting it into basic indoc, we're learning about CRM and performance and resilience. And then we're gonna go into different FARs. By putting it into all of our curriculum, then people have to buy into it. It's automatically respected. We're also relating it to other soft skills. So what other main soft skill do pilots learn? CRM. And we all respect CRM. We know it works. We've all learned it from the very beginning. And by embedding it in with CRM and teaching it together, you're able to get more buy-in. So in summary, we're teaching simple tools like breathing, visualization. We're embedding it into a respected training program and repeatedly exposing them to the information. So every 3 months or so, they're getting a new tool, and by repeatedly exposing them to it, we get better buy-in. My name is Erica Hittinga. My phone number is on the screen, as is my personal email address. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I heard all three of you mention mindfulness. And so the stigma that you specifically mentioned of the demographics of the people that are trying to do this, I can imagine that your yoga classes are very demographically shifted one direction. So the question is, do you have your own app, or do you use a third-party app for mindfulness? Because you're not going to do mindfulness every 3 years. The goal is to make it a regular habit. So do you outsource that type of thing? And same thing for the Air Force. You want people to make this part of their daily routines. So is it something you have internally or outsourced?
Oh, here. Thank you. You got a microphone.
So for the medical student perspective, Headspace gives 2 years free to students through one of our organizations. And yeah, I have a list of different free apps and things that we provide to the students.
Yeah, we do the same thing. I don't know if this is working. We do the same thing as far as like Insight Timer is usually one of my favorite ones. Even YouTube. YouTube's so easy to use. You can get yoga and meditation on YouTube. And then United actually pays for a coaching app. We talked about coaching a little bit before, and we actually allow every employee at United to sign up for free coaching online, which is really cool.
Oh, I don't think Garrett is on.
Ours is basically dependent on the cognitive performance specialist at that location and what they prefer. They have that flexibility to be able to choose. And they do continue to get that academic training on mindfulness throughout their training. So it's not just the one time in T6s, they'll hear it again throughout.
Good. I think we'll see. The video should work.
Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Smith. I'm a family doctor, and I have the incredible privilege of overseeing emotional health for Delta Airlines. And I'm also really honored to be here today to share just a little bit about our journey at Delta toward Delta Wellbeing. I work directly for Dr. Henry Ting, who joined Delta a little over 2 years ago, serving as a consultant for the airline's COVID-19 response. At that time, he was really focused on the health and safety of our employees, our customers, and our communities. But as Henry worked more and more with Delta, our CEO Ed Bastian really recognized the impact that a physician could have on our organization beyond the pandemic. Thinking about things that touch healthcare and well-being overall. And as you know, the pandemic really shined a light on well-being and the opportunities to address burnout and stress and resilience and mental health. And for this reason, Henry joined Delta full-time as the organization's first Chief Health and Wellbeing Officer. And Henry believes well-being is a journey, and our team was created to be there every step of the way, from things like how we structure our benefits packages to how we think about mental health and emotional health, to how people access care and find quality providers. We're there to motivate and inspire our people and help them to create and maintain healthy lives. But we're also there when people need more complex care. And when it comes to mental health care specifically, Delta is doing the work to reduce the stigma associated with it. We've done things like broadcasting town halls about mental health, including really tough conversations about suicide awareness. And this goes out to all of our employees on our internal website. My team regularly visits stations to meet with employees individually or in group settings to ensure that emotional well-being is consistently part of the dialogue at Delta. We believe that talking about it normalizes it and really helps to reduce the stigma, which is one step further in ensuring that people who are struggling can ask for help when they need it. And when somebody does reach out, we want to make sure that our people leaders feel empowered to address their concerns. So we've introduced a leader training through the National Council for Mental Wellbeing. They're the ones who offer our mental health first aid training that I'm sure some of you have completed in the past. And the training that we've designed is specifically focused on addressing the needs of our leadership to be able to recognize and respond to the signs of mental health distress, and then help people to support someone in that moment. We're also doing work to improve access to quality care. We've done so in a couple of ways. Earlier this year, Delta announced that all their people, including household members, have access to 12 free counseling sessions per issue per year through our Employee Assistance Program. And we also have full-time mental health counselors on staff at many of our major hubs to offer that in-the-moment support for employees when they need it. And we've stood up several peer support programs to cater to those unique needs of the business units within Delta. Our Pilot Assistance Network is one of those that has a long and really valued history at Delta. We know that peer support is evidence-based. It's incredibly valuable in improving retention in care, and it can also impact outcomes in mental health and substance use conditions, especially for careers that have specialties like aviation. They have their own nuances, their own demands. It's incredibly valuable to have a peer responding when somebody needs more support, someone who immediately understands so much more and can be there in a time of need. We aren't done yet, though. We'll continue to work with our people to understand their needs and provide resources that will help them on their emotional well-being journey. And this includes partnering with some publicly available resources. And I encourage everyone here to look these up, to utilize these resources. These include groups like NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. They partner with Delta in their work to raise awareness and provide support and education about mental health. And of course, anyone in immediate crisis or risk of suicide can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline now at 988. And while Delta will continue to work in this space, I really encourage all of you to do the same. Talk about mental health openly, ask friends and family how they're doing, and really be there for them if they need help. In the airline industry in particular, we know that people who work for airlines are particularly vulnerable to some of the more severe consequences of mental health conditions. And this means that we need to prioritize mental health. The same way that we prioritize safety in the airline, talking about mental health and making sure that it is prioritized is incredibly valuable to our culture of safety. Safety includes psychological safety, and ensuring that the workplace is a place where people can feel comfortable talking about mental health concerns or raise a concern with a leader is really critical to maintaining that level of safety. The same way that we might recognize symptoms of an illness in a coworker or symptoms of hypoxia in a pilot, we should be ready to recognize in ourselves and in our colleagues signs and symptoms of a mental health condition. But we can only really do that if education on mental health conditions is core to our curriculums and core to the values of an organization. So programs like this Symposium will go a long way to be able to share best practices and ensure that these conversations are taking place and that the work is continuing. So I want to say thank you all for being here today. Thank you for the time to share a little bit about our journey. Enjoy the rest of the symposium and stay well. Thank you.
All right, so thank you for helping with the technology so we could hear Allison's message. So again, opening it up, questions from the audience. Of course, the QR code if you're from a distance or would rather type it in. Questions of the panelists. Students, I'm looking for you too, if you have ideas or comments on what and how you could see some of these industry practices being embedded into aviation programs. I know as a faculty, oftentimes we're focused on what needs to be covered by the FAA, for certificates and ratings, and we kind of lose sight of that bigger picture.
So just a quick question for you ladies up there. Do you think that there would be a good benefit to implementing this same curriculum into like a general education course as a prerequisite, or expounding on that to keep the curriculum flowing through the entire 4 years in an undergrad degree program? Would you see a benefit in that, or just having the prerequisite for aviation flight management?
I think the more that you talk about it, the better it's going to be. So I would say longitudinal makes sense, personally.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the more you talk about it, the more it's normalized. I think it needs to be overall a culture shift, and that starts at every level, right? So if I go to college and I start learning how to take care of myself, I make jokes about pilots, living on energy drinks and candy bars, but weirdly, I'm a physical therapist, and I remember going to grad school. I had no idea how to study. I had no idea how to handle that stress of grad school and all of the tests. So I think it's beneficial for pilots, but I think it's beneficial for everyone. Everyone can improve and can take some tools away in every aspect.
Yeah, and I think too, not to jump in, but I think calling it soft science, because I do that too, in medicine, anything psychologically related. Well, that's soft science. If we can even try and get away from that term, because that in some ways minimizes it, and that's. I have people get mad at me when I say soft science. They go, stop saying that. But, that's part of it.
Yeah, if we could start this in elementary school, that would be amazing. Unfortunately, I don't think society's there yet, but maybe soon. I think also in aviation especially, with mental health, the stigma the way it is, and the fear around mental health, like it is actually genuinely a fear of pilots. Starting that early on would be incredible, where it's like, let's actually talk about how we're feeling today, because it's on the I Am Safe checklist. Like, let's actually go through, how do you feel? Are you super resilient? Because some days, as we all know, some days you're more triggered than other days. Some days, somebody pulling over and cutting you off in traffic is much more upsetting than other days. So if you could really become so self-aware that you're like, I know that I'm really triggered today, so I'm gonna take some deep breaths and maybe put myself in a little timeout for a second, and use some of these skills to calm yourself down. That would be incredible if all humans could be good at that. That'd be amazing.
So I really appreciate what everyone is doing here. This is more for Erica and Brittany. You both mentioned that you have core training programs as part of the regular curriculum for folks. Brittany, you mentioned if someone hooked 2 rides there, and Erica, you also talked about failed check rides. Is there special training for the person in training who exhibits more problems than others, and do they get more intensive opportunities for training?
Yeah, at United, we have a couple different extra training. So it does get pretty serious. Actually, you're only allowed to repeat a sim twice before you get called in for a review board. So it is very serious that you do well. But after the second time, you're either sent in, after the review board, they'll decide, do you need extra resilience training because it's something in your own that you're doing to yourself, or do you need enhanced CRM training? Are you being nasty with your partner and you need to learn how to work better with others? So we have different modalities and different routes that people can go depending on what the issue is, and we'll go through people's training records to see, you know, if they're hesitant, if they're nervous, if they're showing a lack of confidence, they'll come to me and my team with resilience. If they're being argumentative and nasty with their sim partner, they'll go to CRM training. So it's pretty cool, and it really covers all bases.
Yeah, absolutely. So for CRAFT, we have academics in the instructor pilot curriculum as well, so for them to learn tools for themselves, but also for their students. So we really encourage, if you're seeing a student struggling with one of the things, push them towards a CRAFT specialist. So if they're having difficulties with their check rides, they can say, hey, I suggest you go see the cognitive specialist. They do have those required syllabus items, but there are a lot of students that will go above and beyond those, and they are able to self-identify. Not everyone is what they need, and they'll go seek out that assistance themselves. So it's there as much as they need it based on the time that they have, really. So.
And I'm also a peer support. I work with United's SOAR program, our peer support program. So when I see people come through and they need extra help, I will always send them to SOAR and suggest that they call peer support, because that really is the backbone.
So I just had a quick question about the like United Resilience training and CRAFT as well. How much time do you think is assigned to these training sessions? How intensive is it? Is it something that you could see folded into like a 3-credit college course? Or do you think it'd be more in terms of like a long-term flight training standpoint? Like what, if you're folding this into like a university setting, what would you consider the best way to do that would be?
That's a great question. I would say, as far as folding it into a university setting, a 3-credit course might be excessive. But what we're actually trying to do at United, we haven't quite figured out how to pull it off yet. We want to turn it into a simulator thing. So if the instructor is aware enough to see, okay, they're ruminating about that like horrendous V1 cut that happened 5 minutes ago, then you can bring the student actually through, okay, let's breathe together for a second and let's do a mental interrupt and get back into the present moment. And by using it in real time and using it in the simulator, you can actually improve that through all of training. So if you could start that at university level, like really notice if your student's stuck on something that's so common where they ruminate and, oh, I screwed up that stall, oh my gosh, I'm gonna fail. Just have them calm down. Hey, let's take a really deep breath together. Let's get back in this moment. Okay, and then you can move forward. And that will stick with people. Eventually, as we all have probably read about neuroscience, the more you practice something, the more automatic it becomes. And so if you turn it into, you're stressed out, you take a deep breath, it's eventually going to become an automatic thing, which is awesome, and that'll go with you for the rest of your career.
Yeah, absolutely, and I would argue that you could make it a holistic credit course. So you said 3 credits might be excessive for that component, but you could also teach them, physical wellness and some dietitian, just some general life skills that I think unfortunately, we all don't understand. So as a physical therapist, I could definitely benefit some dietitian courses, work with our cognitive specialists. We require certain courses throughout every university. Why couldn't we require that 1 3-credit course as a baseline for any degree? I don't think it would cause anybody harm.
And if you don't mind me jumping in too, I think as the professors and the instructors, if they can embed into their presentations something that they do, or even the moment to take that time to stop and breathe, that can be very effective, and that can get you really thinking about that through your undergrad experience as well.
Too, while you're in undergrad especially, it's important now to set the foundation for the rest of your career, learning how to chair fly in a really effective way by visualizing yourself in the cockpit and really taking that extra time to make it effective study technique. That's key, because we even have people at United who are not good at chair flying, and then they come and I teach them how to do it. But if you could teach yourself how to do that early on and even teach that in classes, that would be amazing.
Okay, so I have a question. A study was just published about the emotional intelligence in the pilot populations, and research has shown that unexpressed emotion leads to ruminating, which we've talked about a lot today, and intellectualized emotions can be stored in our physical bodies, which then can lead to chronic pain, which you've also discussed, chronic illness, substance abuse, which we discussed today, and have lasting mental health ramifications as well. So I heard a lot of talk about improving pilot performance, but can any of you speak to your programs improving pilots and aviators' emotional intelligence as well? How are we encouraging and teaching aviators to be able to identify, feel through, and validate their emotions rather than just focusing on the ability to perform?
I love that question because I'm all about emotions. Love it. It's really hard to teach that to pilots. Just to be straight up honest with you, teaching pilots like, let's get angry and hit pillows is never gonna happen. So like for me personally, as a pilot, I have captains cry in the cockpit all the time because they feel open enough where they can talk to me about it. However, most pilots have probably major emotional blockages. And I think really my one-on-one sessions, they cry 100% of the time because they're all blocked up. So the key really is making it okay that we're all humans, and that conversation is happening, which is really amazing. There is a shift happening, and you don't see it all the time, but I would say you notice with a lot of people that they're more open to talking about it. And wow, I am sad, and I am affected by this divorce, whereas it used to be, my kid just died a month ago and I'm fine. No, you're not fine, and that's okay that you're not fine. So the fact that the conversations are happening now, which is a massive improvement from even 5 years ago. I think COVID kind of wrecked us all up enough to bring that to the surface.
I guess the conversation's happening, which is very important. Pilots, they're just a different breed. They have to be, right? Especially in the military. But we have the conversations and we have the support there, and I think they get to know the cognitive specialists on a personal level and are starting to get more open. They do kind of direct them in the, I don't want to say self-discovery, but kind of identifying, I thought I felt this way, and it turns out now that I know I didn't actually feel that way. So that's one of our even post-assessments. So I don't think it's anything that's going to happen overnight, but I think we're starting in the right direction. The conversation has to start, which it did. So, but I like that you brought up the physical and the mental. I see it every day. They're both together. It's not separate. So.
I don't mean to jump in front of you real quick, but as pilots, do you think we're preconditioned to ignore our emotions and to become, I guess, inhuman? And if so, why?
I do think so. I think that one of the beautiful parts of being a pilot and one of the skills that we all have is compartmentalization. We are awesome at compartmentalizing. I don't want to think about that. I'm putting it in a box, and it's going to stay on that shelf in my head for years. And it's great when we need to do that and fly and have a safe flight, but it is also to our detriment because a lot of times people don't take that box down off the shelf and look at what they've put in there. And that is another conversation that we need to have. But it is, this emotional coldness that maybe we have, while it's to our detriment sometimes, causing neck pain and back pain, it is also a safety thing too. We need to be good at compartmentalizing. If we're all up in the cockpit with big emotions, that's not safe at all, really. So it's good and bad. So finding that balance is important.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Renee OShaughnessy, and I wrote a book about mental health in aviation. And one thing that we have to keep in mind, that mental health is not mental illness. I want to thank each one of you ladies for sharing. You're spot on and well done. When I was writing my book, I interviewed 100 pilots. And throughout my 35 years in the cockpit, I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of men and women. It's amazing the stories that come out at 350 in the middle of the night. My comment is that through my 100 interviews of the pilots, they all have emotions. They just don't want to talk about them. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it is very, very true. Yeah, emotions are scary when you haven't felt them in 50 years. But we're encouraging them to soften up a little bit.
And when licensure is involved, you know, that's another layer of it that scares people. So absolutely. If we could call it brain health, I think it would be better. I always say you can envision a brain, right? Like you can think of that. Mental is such a hard, it's a hard concept. So yeah.
Hi. So I was wondering, so we've been talking about how like there's a lot of pushback in, you know, talking about our emotions and like even just talking about this concept of like mental health and like I'm only a freshman in college, but like I've been around aviation for a while and like this past like couple of years is like the first time that I've really like heard this conversation like happening. And so like what are you guys doing? Or like what are your strategies? Like you talked about like using Navy SEAL language and calling it resilience instead of like, you know, mental health and whatever. And so like what are other strategies to kind of make pilots actually want to be a part of this conversation? And then kind of like an additional question is like, how do you see your programs expanding if you see that at all in the future? Thank you.
Okay, I'll go again. Fine. So I think starting out early is so important. So United has Aviate Academy. It's our little academy where our flow program. And starting that conversation there. So I've gone down there several times to have this talk with students about it being okay to be stressed out. It's stressful. Training is really a lot to take on, and you're taking on a bunch of debt at the same time, and it's a lot. And so we're starting by teaching resilience at that level and making it okay to talk about emotions. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes it takes just time. Our older generation is not going to be comfortable with that for the most part, but by starting with the younger generation and starting with our newer pilots, that's why we're doing it in basic NDOC as well, right off the bat, making it, this is acceptable at United. We talk about mental health here at United, and we talk about maybe not feelings, because that's scary, but we talk about being human, and that's okay. And so I think just opening that up right off the bat when you start at a new company, that's really, really important.
Yeah, so how do we get folks to participate in the military training is we force them because it's in their syllabus. But they do enjoy it. They do beyond the syllabus requirements, so that shows us that it's important to them because their time is invaluable. So those conversations are starting day one when they start pilot training, and they continue to have them throughout all of their pilot training. So I think laying that groundwork before, I know that there's a lot of again, that stigma, they come into pilot training, whether they've already heard that or not, they're gonna start hearing it. So if we start pushing that it's okay to have these conversations day one at the same time they may or may not be hearing, don't talk about it, I think we're starting the conversation and they're hearing it continually, so.
And just, again, providing that language, giving the language to talk about it, giving the space and the time is really important too. And the confidentiality piece, reminding them of that as well.
And then this is a question specifically for the Air Force program. So how many of the people, so you're required to go through it as part of the syllabus, right? And part of the training as well as with the strength and conditioning coaches and the other two. How many people do you see going beyond that required 1 hour? Is that a majority of the students, or is that more of or the student saying, okay, well, I have to do my 1 hour this week. I'm going to go do my 1 hour in the gym and then be done with it?
So a lot of them do over what's required, and we found that the students that are doing the best are doing the most with CRAFT. And is that because they're overachievers already and so they're continuing to overachieve? We aren't sure. We don't have that data yet, but there is a good percentage that do over the basic requirements. And a lot of them have identified and are able to identify when they need to see the cognitive specialist or the strength coach to help them through whatever part of training they're having difficulties with. So the students enjoy it. They find that it's beneficial and it's worth their time, which if it's worth their time, it shows us that that's very important.
So my question's for everyone. I think in our school, especially where I'm from, Embry-Riddle-Prescott, students kind of sometimes they realize that they have like a mental health issue or whatnot, and they want to take a break, but they feel like they cancel their flight, or if an instructor cancels they're going to be super delayed, and they feel super guilty. And so I see a lot of students that know they're stressed, that knows they need to take time off, but just can't. So do you guys have something within the organization that allows employees to understand that it's okay to take time, or is there like a set amount of time that they can take off or whatnot in both the Air Force and the airlines and the school, where there is a deadline that you have to meet, or like training needs to be done, or in how many simulations? So how do you guys make the employees or other people feel that it's okay to take that time off, or other than just kind of including it in the part of the training process?
So at United, it's very much depends on the situation. If somebody passed away in your family and it's affecting you in a huge way, United is awesome at giving people time off for that. However, if you just lost your dog and you want 3 months off, no, we're not going to give you that. So it depends really on the situation, and at some point, you're just not going to get paid. So if you want to take extra time off, maybe we'll approve it, but you're probably not going to get paid for it. So that's up to the pilot to decide, really, if they're willing to deal with that.
Yeah, so ours is mostly in pilot training. So they would work, it's going to be situation dependent, really. They would work with potentially the cognitive specialist if they're, I guess, stressed about the ride, and that's kind of why they're wanting to push that off a little bit, or if they're having more outside influences, they can get referred to a different provider to help them work through that. And then they would work with their instructor pilots on when they feel safe that they can go back to flying.
And on the med school side of things, there's some time off built in, but also, they have exams every 4 weeks. So if they're approaching an exam date and they're not doing well mentally, as long as they let us know ahead of time, we can delay the exam as long as we can to give them the time to be there, because if you're not mentally well, you're not in the space to take that exam and perform well. So we have some cushion in there. That requires them coming and talking about it, obviously, but yeah, we do.
Thank you. I think we have time for one last question that might be my own question. So lots of times at university settings, we do put a lot of focus on our students, as it should be, but we also have to remember the mental well-being of our faculty and staff. And especially I look at a flight training organization, some of the most stressful work is being done by our flight instructors. Major Norris, could you share with us your recovery room concept? Because when I was at Randolph, I was super impressed. I even sent pictures to our chief flight instructor and our dean about that concept. Could you share with us what that is?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the good thing about CRAFT is we have some standardization, but we also allow flexibility. So every program, they take it and run with it, and they come up with great ideas. They love the students. They love the program. So Randolph, within the IFF, Intro to Fighter Fundamentals, so folks that are already tracking fighters, they have built a recovery room. So the students and instructor pilots can go in there. It has a massage chair. It has like the hydro boots that they can put on after a workout. They can sit in the chair and they can relax. They can read. I hear they take a couple naps between rides in there sometimes. What else do they have? Some heating pads. We looked at foam rollers, just a physical recovery room, but also a mental recovery room. It just gives them a space to be away. They can have that quiet location. They can study. Instructor pilots can just take a break. they are often just as busy as our students, so it gets a lot of use. We're looking at putting them at every location because they've been so successful at Randolph with it.